Welcome to the Gerbil Experiments with Megan Stevens of eatbeautiful.net. Hi everyone, I'm Megan Stevens from eatbeautiful.net, and today I have the fun privilege of giving you an update on the gerbil experiment that I've been doing, and also introducing you to sort of the next stage that I went into when I came into some challenges with the gerbils. So I have the cages behind me for fun so you can see them while I'm talking. On my one side, I have the gerbils that I've had all along, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about them and what's happened with them during the experiment. And then on my other side, I actually have some newer critters, and those are my mice. And also during the time that I was sick, and prior to that, I actually raised quite a few rats. And so I'm just going to share with you today everything I've done, everything I've learned, and where we are with this whole experiment process. It definitely did not go as smoothly or as I expected, and so some of the challenges, I guess that's part of science, and it's been a curious and interesting process where I've had to adjust and learn and be flexible, not be discouraged, try again. So I'll just start with telling you firstly about the gerbils and the update on them. In the beginning, for those of you who may not be aware or who want a quick reminder or update on what happened with them, I started with 2 females, and after talking with Grant Genera, I realized they weren't quite young enough, and so I went ahead and acquired a male, and his name is Po Boy. I got him at 8 weeks, which is the ideal age for starting the experiment. But I got him actually to breed with the females so that we could have babies, and once they were weaned, immediately start them on a very low, basically 0 vitamin A diet. And so for some reason, I didn't really clue in that I could have just done the experiment on Po Boy. But it happened nonetheless, even though I wasn't thinking of it with that mindset. Nonetheless, Po Boy did have a basically 0 vitamin A diet, and he quickly, did the 10-week experiment flawlessly, ended up with a, smooth, shiny coat of fur and no health problems whatsoever. Now we are almost a whole year after that. I got him at the end of June last year. So he's he is a year old actually. I got him at 8 weeks. So he's over a year old, but he's been doing the lower 0 vitamin A diet for almost a whole year, and he's just as healthy as ever. So really beautiful coat of fur, no eye problems, no health problems at all. When I first got him, he did actually have a seizure, which is pretty common with the feed that they give them in pet stores. So I was really curious to see how long it would take him to have normal behavior, and we just saw that one seizure. So really, I think the 0 to very, very low vitamin A diet helped him to gain optimum health, and he's still in optimum health now. He's now had, I think, 3 litters of babies with the females. So he's also fertile. And so I think just right there we have a successful experiment. I just wasn't thinking of it like that during the process, and I kept trying to get babies. And that actually has been more challenging because, unfortunately, the gerbils have some cannibalistic qualities, and I had to learn through a study that something similar happens with hamsters, that when they don't have enough B3 in their diets, they can become cannibalistic. And so I have started adding a very, very, very tiny amount of nicotinic acid to their water. But yeah, so I just wanted to review. Their diet has just been oats and rice, and I have given them a teeny tiny bit of buffalo because it is high in vitamin B12, and it does also have some niacin in it, or vitamin B3. So, let's see. Oh, and beans. So beans, oats, rice, tiny bit of plain chicken breast or buffalo, and that's it for the last year. So I just want to say, yay, like we do have a successful experiment there with Po Boy. And then because I didn't have that in my mindset that we had a successful experiment that had already happened with Po Boy, because I was trying so hard to get baby gerbils, I went ahead and acquired rats. And I made a really big mistake that was an interesting experiment in and of itself with the rats. And that's that I purchased them from basically a feed store for snakes, thinking it was the only way. I had such a hard time locating rodents that were young enough. So when I thought of this idea, I could go to a feeder store and you can get them at any age from the time they're, still nursing till the time that they've weaned or after, I thought, wow, that's a great way to get baby rats. But in fact, it wasn't, because I discovered a really kind of sad industry where the rats are being bred and raised simply to be eaten by snakes, and they're pretty much in really bad shape when you get them. And so when I'd bring them home, sometimes they die immediately. Sometimes their fur would be really mottled, which is a sign of deteriorating health. And that's why I always comment on the rodents I have here. They're eating the 0 to low vitamin A diet. Their coats are always smooth and shiny. But the rats often had kind of gross fur. So I did start the rats in actually 3 separate cages, because one of the original goals I had with this experiment was to give them 3 separate feeds. One would be the Wolbach and Howe diet. One would be the essentially 0 vitamin A diet. And the third, I thought it would be fun just to do like a rainbow diet and give them like sweet potatoes and red bell pepper and kale and butter, and see what happened with the cage that was eating what we consider superfoods. So that's what I did with the rats. So I did kind of have some fun ideas going into that experiment. But what I found was that all of the rats were sick when they came to me, which is, again, so sad that rats are being raised in such poor conditions to feed to snakes that they come to you sick no matter what. I did go through a lot of rats. I went back to that store many times and kept trying, thinking they've got to have some healthy rats. But what ended up happening that was really interesting is that the diets I was feeding the rats in some cases were healthier than what they were getting from the pet food store. And so in some cases, the rats' health improved. And ironically, that actually happened with the Wolbach and Howe cage, which I called it. Basically meant that I was creating my best version of the 1925 feed, which I expected to kill whatever I fed it to. But here's where it gets interesting. I want to talk to you a little bit more about what went into trying to replicate the feed that Wolbach and Howe created for their rats back in 1925. So the situation was, back then they really cared about sterility, and because they wanted to isolate as much as they could any possible contaminants, and they wanted to rule out anything else that could be problematic. And of course, they didn't know about precursors, so they weren't able to rule out the vitamin A precursors that they put in the feed. They would heat the feed during the cooking process for 4 hours at 320 degrees Fahrenheit. And when I tried to do this so that I could create a feed just like theirs, what I quickly found out is that it oxidizes, it becomes rancid, and the fumes are incredibly toxic. And so I did make this feed multiple times. I made pellets for my rats, but I could only have our oven on at that temperature with that feed for 45 minutes before we had to open all the doors in our house, all the windows, turn on the fans, and just decided, you know what, this is way too toxic. There is no way we are going to cook this for 4 hours in our home. And so Wolbach and Howe created a much more toxic feed for their rats with that goal of sterility for their feed. 4 hours of baking something creates a completely toxic food for the rats. And then on top of that, they added the lard, which contains vitamin A. So interestingly, my feed for my rats, because I couldn't get it as toxic as theirs, actually ended up being somewhat nutritious for my rats, because Wolbach and Howe were very careful to provide a starch and a protein and all the macronutrient sources, including different salts and minerals that the rats needed. And so I had one rat that actually lived a long time, and he came to me sick, and I kind of ended up nursing him back to health with this Wolbach and Howe diet because mine wasn't as toxic as theirs. So what I found is that I really can't replicate the Wolbach and Howe diet. There's no way to create as toxic a pellet as they had. And interestingly, I don't think I could have figured that out unless I had tried doing it myself. And now I know that we just have to accept that when we look at the recipe and how they created it, that was a toxic recipe. But what we've learned that's more valuable is that a diet with virtually 0 vitamin A has all of my rodents thriving. Not the rats, because the rats were too sick. They came to me ready to die. So I couldn't nurse them back to health with the 0 vitamin A diet like the Wolbach and Howe that covered all the macronutrients so well. But what I've got is I've got gerbils that are over a year old on the almost 0 vitamin A diet. And then now I've actually got a couple of mice. So next step in the scientific process, I want to share with you about my mice. So these mice I acquired about 3 weeks ago, and I acquired them nice and young. They are babies. I also got them from a feeder store, but a different one. I had the idea, well, if all the rats from this one snake store are sick and dying, maybe if I go to a totally different store and try mice, I can get healthier animals. And how about if I buy them even younger? And so that's what I did. I bought very young mice from a different feed store, and I got 2 healthy mice. So I'm so happy that I am 3 weeks into this experiment now. They are on a virtually 0 vitamin A diet. When I say virtually, I just mean it's as low as we can possibly get a diet. So it's essentially 0 vitamin A, but it's hard to say anything has 0 vitamin A. So it's extremely, extremely low. Low enough that Wolbach and Howe would have been satisfied, and it's not killing my mice. So far they're super healthy. They've got smooth, shiny pelts. They're very active and energetic. And I'm looking forward to the last video I'm going to do is going to be at the 10-week mark for the mice. So my hope and prayer is that these mice do great on this 0 vitamin A diet, and that in addition to Po' Boy, there'll be an excellent experiment showing that mice and rodents and humans don't require any vitamin A to thrive. So if at the 10-week mark they have healthy eyes, healthy pelts, and they're super energetic and doing great, then we have successfully accomplished our science experiment and shown that rodents do not require vitamin A to thrive and survive. So thanks for tuning in. I will see you again at the 10-week mark after my mice hopefully are still thriving, and we can then conclude the purpose of this whole experiment, that just like rats, mice, and gerbils, humans do not need vitamin A to survive or thrive. So don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel, comment below the video. I love seeing any questions or comments you may have. And then watching the full duration of any and all of my videos is really helpful for YouTube to show them to more people. So thanks for doing that. Thanks for your interest in this topic. And I'll see you next time in about 7 weeks with an update on the mice. Bye for now.